You have met clever people. You may even be one. But clever gets you out of the room. It does not tell you which room to be in. The wise person is not faster. They are aimed differently. Welcome to the Stoic Compass. I am Epictetus, and today I am joined by Carl Jung and LAOZI. Today we are examining what separates a wise person from a clever one. Let me make this concrete immediately. A clever person sees an obstacle and finds a way around it. A wise person asks whether the obstacle is telling them something they need to hear. Those are not the same move. One is speed, the other is orientation. And you cannot have both if you never pause long enough to know which one you are doing.
I would push further than that. Cleverness is not just speed, it is a particular relationship to the self. The clever person has learned, often very early, that their mind is a tool for navigating a world that felt unsafe or unpredictable. They sharpened it, they became exceptional at it. But the mind that is always solving is also always defending. The question worth asking is what the cleverness is protecting.
You are both already inside the comparison, wise versus clever, better versus worse. You have decided there is a contest before you have looked at what is actually happening. The person you call clever may be doing exactly what the moment requires. The person you call wise may simply be slower and calling it depth.
That is a generous reading, LAOZI, and I think it lets people off the hook. There is a difference between slowness and wisdom, and you know it. Wisdom is not a pace. Wisdom is the ability to distinguish what is yours to act on from what is not. A clever person can solve any problem you put in front of them. A wise person looks at the problem and asks first whether solving it is even the right response. That is not a small difference. That is everything.
And yet the wise person Epictetus is describing, the one who pauses, who asks the right questions, who knows what is theirs to carry, where does that person come from? They do not arrive at wisdom through logic alone. They arrive through having been wrong in ways that cost them something. They arrive through having been clever and discovering that it was not enough. Wisdom, in my experience, is what grows in the space that failure opens up. Cleverness resists that space. It rushes to close it.
That is closer to something real, but I would not frame it as failure opening the space. The space is always there. Clever people do not fail to find wisdom because they lack suffering. They fail to find it because they are always moving. You cannot see what is here if you are always already somewhere else.
So your answer is stillness?
Not exactly. You can be still and still be running from something. I mean something more like not adding to what is here. The clever person adds a solution, adds an argument, adds a plan. The wise person sometimes just sees what is already present without immediately reaching for it.
I find that dangerously easy to romanticize. People sit with what is present and call it wisdom when it is actually indecision. I have seen it. The student who meditates on a problem for weeks and does nothing. The man who accepts every difficulty as natural order and never changes his circumstances. Wisdom has to include action. It has to include a willingness to decide. Otherwise, you are just calling your paralysis philosophy.
You are not wrong about the danger, but I think you are describing a very specific failure, the person who uses the language of wisdom to avoid confronting something. That is not wisdom either, that is the shadow wearing a wise person's mask. The shadow borrows the vocabulary of depth to justify staying comfortable. True wisdom requires you to see that, to see when your equanimity is earned and when it is avoidance, and that distinction is not obvious. It requires a kind of self-examination that is genuinely uncomfortable.
Now you are both describing the same thing from different sides again. Epictetus says wisdom must move. Jung says wisdom must look inward. Neither of you is wrong, but you are both describing instruments, not the thing itself. A hammer is useful, a mirror is useful. Wisdom is knowing which one you are holding.
All right, then tell me this. Someone gives you two people. One has read everything. The other has suffered greatly and paid attention to it. Which one is more likely to be wise?
The second one, without question, but only if they did not convert the suffering into bitterness. Bitterness is what happens when pain is processed through ego rather than examined. The bitter person has suffered just as much as the wise one. They simply refuse to ask what the suffering was showing them.
And the first person, the one who has read everything, is not necessarily less wise. Reading can be a kind of attention if it is honest. The problem is not the books. The problem is when the books become armor. When someone uses what they know to avoid what they feel.
I will grant that knowledge is not the enemy of wisdom, but knowledge that stays entirely inside the mind, that is never tested against real loss, real failure, real constraint, that knowledge does not become wisdom, it becomes sophistication, and sophistication is just cleverness with a larger vocabulary.
I think that is exactly right. And what strikes me is that sophistication can be very convincing to others and to the person themselves. The sophisticated person often believes they are wise. They have all the arguments. They can articulate the nuances. But nuance without integration is still just a performance of understanding. The test of whether you have genuinely understood something is whether it has changed how you live, not merely how you speak.
Yes, and this is where I think the distinction becomes clear, not in what someone says or even what they know, in whether there is a gap between those things and how they actually move through their day. The wise person is not someone who has eliminated that gap entirely. No one does. They are someone who can see the gap honestly and is not threatened by what they find there.
Now we're getting somewhere. The clever person uses their intelligence to shrink the apparent gap, to explain it away, to justify it, to reframe it as a feature rather than a flaw. The wise person looks at the gap and says, that is real information. What is it telling me? And then, here is the part that matters. They actually do something about it.
Though sometimes doing something about it means sitting with it longer than feels comfortable. The ego wants resolution. It wants to act because action proves competence. But some gaps do not respond to action. They respond to attention. Sustained, non-defensive attention. The wise person can hold that tension without collapsing it prematurely.
I want to say something simpler than both of you. The clever person lives mostly in the future, the next problem, the next solution, the next position to hold. The wise person lives mostly in what is, not in a passive way, simply here, this, what is actually occurring. The clever mind is extraordinarily useful for navigation, but if you never stop navigating, you never arrive anywhere.
And what does it mean to arrive?
It means being in your life rather than always preparing for it.
I think that is worth sitting with. But I want to name something before we leave this debate. Wisdom is not a personality type. It is not something you either have or do not have. It is a practice. It is built through decision after decision, each one made with as much honesty about your own role as you can manage. The clever person can become wise, but only if they are willing to be wrong in ways that their cleverness cannot immediately fix.
And only if they are willing to look at what the cleverness has been covering. Because in almost every case I have encountered, behind the very brilliant mind there is something the brilliance was built to protect. Some early wound, some fear of inadequacy, some experience that taught the person that being the smartest in the room was the only reliable form of safety. Wisdom does not require you to stop being intelligent. It requires you to stop needing the intelligence to keep you safe.
The river does not become less itself when it meets the rock. It simply finds a different way through. That is not submission. That is the river knowing what it is.
Then let that be the last argument. You have heard the three of us debate the shape of it. Now hear the thing itself.
Most people who come to me thinking they need to become wiser discover the same thing. They are already surrounded by wisdom. It is available to them in every situation where they feel defensive, resistant, or quietly ashamed. The problem is not that wisdom is absent. The problem is that cleverness moves too fast to notice it. Here's what I mean. The clever mind is oriented toward the external, towards solving, impressing, prevailing. It is extraordinarily good at managing how things appear, including how you appear to yourself, and so it becomes very skilled at producing explanations. The explanation for why you behaved that way, the explanation for why the relationship failed, the explanation for why you are stuck. The explanation is almost always technically correct, and it almost never gets to the truth. Wisdom begins the moment you slow down enough to notice that you are explaining instead of examining. Explaining protects you, examining changes you, and the only thing standing between those two things is a few seconds of genuine honesty about what you are actually feeling underneath the argument you have already prepared. Today, try this. Find one place in your life where you have a very good explanation for something that is not working. Write it down, then set it aside and write down what you would have to admit if the explanation were not available to you. You do not have to act on what you find, just look at it. That gap between the explanation and the admission, that is exactly where the work begins.
You are clever enough. That has never been the question. The question is whether you are willing to be honest in the moments when your cleverness runs out. When the argument is finished and the room is quiet and something in you still knows that something is not a mystery. It does not require a library or a teacher. It requires only that you stop talking long enough to hear it. Stop then. It is already there. If today's conversation has served you, take it further. Pay Attention by C. Tribute, 12 Lessons in the Practice of Seeing Clearly, available now on Amazon.